Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Game of Thrones is the HBO show about the lands of Westeros and the fight for the Iron Throne, set against the coming of a great and terrible winter and hordes of the undead from living beyond the wall of ice. Now, I'm not even going to try and do a recap of this show because, we're 7 seasons in, and if you're not on board, the Game of Thrones train by this point, where have you been? What have you been doing? Why are you even watching this review? And that's the point. If you're new to the channel, why not subscribe? And you can actually follow me on Twitter on @GrumpyOpinions. Yeah, so maybe do that. Episode 1, King's Landing, which is kind of a clever title when you think about it, starts off at like Winterfell, where Dany and Jon and half of just about everybody in the show is arriving back from everywhere else that they've been. And Arya's kind of taken stock of all who's there. And so then it's like introductions, reintroductions, and all kind of meet cutes all round. And some of it's fun, some of it's awkward. And it's actually Bran who eventually just decides that, we kind of need to get on with the show.
We don't have time for all this.
So then wee Lord Umber III, last standing, it's like told to go and get his dudes from his base, like before wee Lady Mormont, because there's so many wee lords and ladies at this point because so many people have died. Anyway, she says like what's on everyone's mind and points out that nobody's really happy that Jon got made king and then he went away and he came back like all bird-struck and giddy with his blonde bombshell girlfriend, happy to let her do the queening, and he sits back and just obeys. Anyway, it's up to Tyrion to wade in to do some kind of motivational speaking, which doesn't really work because, the North is grim and full of arseholes. Anyway, everyone's being kind of vaguely practical. Gendry's working on dragonglass since he's a blacksmith and weapon maker, and he gets catching up with Arya because, he's a grown man now and she's not a little girl anymore. Oh aye. And Tyrion's up catching up with his ex-wife, and he's bouncing around political ideas and stuff with Varys and Davos, and Jon's off flying dragons and getting some Khaleesi kisses, and then arguing with his sister cousins, and then everything seems to be like a balancing act of awkward but hopeful, until Daenerys goes to thank and reward Samwell Tarly for curing Jorah of his grayscale last season. And it turns out that she's absolutely no idea that he's a surviving Tarly, because she melted his dad and brother last season to make a point, and understandably he's a little bit upset when she mentions it. And Bran tells him that it's time that Jon Snow knew about the secret of his parentage. So Sam trots down to the crypt and tells him about what Dany did, and then he drops the bombshell on him that he's actually the true heir to the throne of all the Seven Kingdoms, and technically, he's actually Dany's nephew. Ooh. And obviously that's a little bit of a shock, and it gets worse when Sam follows it up by pointing out that if Jon was king, he wouldn't have murdered prisoners just to make a point, and Dany's never going to give up the throne for the good of the people like he did. Uh-oh. Meanwhile, down at King's Landing, words reach them about the breaking of the wall, and Cersei's all sorts of upset about it, obviously.
Good.
Anyway, she's even more pleased that Euron Greyjoy's back and he's brought a whole load of mercenaries from the Gold Company, and she's a little bit less pleased that he wants his down payment on what was promised, namely that he's getting to jump in the sack with her. But surprisingly, she actually agrees eventually, and he's quite happy about it all, and he makes jokey remarks that he's going to pop a sprog in her tummy, but clearly she's not quite all as into it as she pretended. And anyway, more fool him, because while he was away Queenie bopping, his nephew Theon was raiding his ship and rescued Theon's sister Yara, and they're back off to recapture the Iron Islands, or at least she is, because Theon's place is with the Starks who raised him, so they do a big goodbye. And even Bronn's having a bad time of it, because here he is about to get on with 3 ladies, and then he gets interrupted and told here's a crossbow and some mad cash, go and kill the Queen's 2 brothers, and he's like, okay. Meanwhile, back up north, the undead hunter posse is storming a castle, and they've got some of the Night's Watch with them, and it turns out that it's wee Lord Jon Umber's place. And it turns out that the Night King already got there, and he's been in the base killing all the dudes, and he left the boy there as a warning. Of course, that also makes the boy a blue-eyed white now, so they stab him with Beric's Bernie sword of bad ashery, and then they start to plan going back to Winterfell. And speaking of going back to Winterfell, guess who just arrived there? Jaime Lannister, and would you credit it, he only turns around and runs right into Bran, the very boy he crippled in the very first episode of the show. Wow, this could go a bit badly for old Goldenpaw. So what did I think? Well, in case you didn't know, I really love Game of Thrones. I love the show and I love the books. I've been kind of patiently waiting for this for a while. Especially to see this final season. And you might actually notice I did a couple of Game of Thrones review back from season 5, but I got swamped with life and work and stuff, and I never actually covered any more of it. But so, let's get this final season done properly, yeah? Anyway, this is the first of 6 final episodes, and apparently each one gets a little bit longer and broader in scope. They're mini movies after a while, but this one's still just an hour long. So this episode was really kind of, as the beginning, it's kind of the setting up of the chessboard, and I really liked it. I really liked the fact that, they called it King's Landing, which is quite clever because, it's Jon finding out that he's actually a king, and he also landed on a dragon. and also a little bit happened in King's Landing. Clever stuff. But anyway, a bit of time has passed since the end of last season, because you remember, like last season, Cersei learned about like the undead being real, and Jon and Dany started getting together, and like the Walkers had just managed to like break the wall using that undead dragon. So a lot of this is just taking up time with getting people in the right places and establishing who everybody is in relation to each other, who knows who wants to do a bad stab on someone else. And what amazed me about this week was the sheer amount of just tiny little nods back to the very, very first episode of Game of Thrones. From like, the wee boy running around trying to get a look. I mean, that was just like Arya in the first episode, and meetings in the crypt, that all happened. And like the dead body patterns left by the walkers, I mean, that happened in the first episode. And even the final moment where Bran and Jaime are looking at each other, I mean, that's really paying off the closing moment of the pilot where, Jaime pushed Bran out of the window. I mean, it's really bringing a lot of stuff full circle. And I like the fact that a lot of the kind of long expected meetings and catch ups and stuff and a few hugs and kisses, it was great. Especially like the happy ones. I mean, Arya and Jon meeting up, that was wonderful, like seeing them hug and like chatting about swords and stuff, which was another callback, but I mean, that was to episode 2. But also her reunion with the Hound, I mean, that was kind of cold as expected, but that's the relationship's always been a bit like that.
You're a cold little bitch, aren't you? Guess that's why you're still alive.
And then hers with Gendry, and that was cute as all hell because like immediately they're just straight back to like they're mucking about and slagging each other off and flirting a wee bit. But there's that little bit of an edge to the fact that they're both a little bit older and wiser, and they probably both realise that there's maybe a little more than just being pals between them now, and something else could happen. But also there was lots of like unpleasant meetings and bad feelings around and setups of like tension going forward. I mean, apart from the Jaime and Bran stuff, we've also got like Sansa and Dany, and there's friction there because they hate each other and with good reason. Also, you've got like Sam's little revelation to Jon, and that's going to cause a big wedge in like that Targaryen incest relationship because basically Jon's kind of a lawful good guy with a decent moral compass, whereas Dany, she thinks she's a good person, but essentially she's kind of a semi-benign dictator with a nice smile and like that the unshakable confidence in herself that youth gives her that she's righteous in everything she does. And it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause problems between them, even more so when she finds out that he's technically actually the heir to the throne and it should be her bending the knee to him. And other things I kind of liked, there was a new startup sequence. I mean, that was really cool. Now new and shiny. It's nice that they've done a little work on it and made it a bit different. Felt a little strange, but it was good strange. And also the wee bit where like the dragons kept looking at Jon and Dany when they're kissing, making him uncomfortable. I mean, it was a bit like going around somebody's house and trying to get on with them, and like their dog just staring at you. That made me laugh. Anyway, I also liked the fact that the undead posse turned up, and they're actually quite good at their jobs. I mean, they're moving quietly through the castle, and they're ready when stuff happens, but they also managed not to like kill their mates when they came around the corner. I mean, there was just loads of stuff to like in this episode, and loads of character beats and stuff going on. But yeah, so far everything seems off to a pretty good start. So what wasn't so great? Well, this week actually, the fact of the matter was, as I said, this is a setting up episode. This is like a chessboard getting laid out. Now, there's a lot of lovely moments, but there was also an awful lot of not a lot happening. Because if you think about it, a huge amount was just set up and was just people talking to each other, and a lot of it wasn't actually plot advancing information. Now, that's fine, we can live with that, but there's only 6 episodes this season, so that's now only 5 episodes, so maybe about 7 hours of actual show, because some of them are going to be longer, maybe 8, but it's not that much time left. And it's a bit of a minor concern, but considering that, this episode was actually better than most of last season, I don't think it's going to be a massive deal, and nothing really annoyed me or broke my immersion in this episode. I mean, generally it was a good episode. But it's also sad to see a few of the same issues cropping back up again that have cropped up before, like even in previous seasons before last season, which was kind of rubbish. I mean, like the Greyjoys getting sidelined again, with random moments instead of actual plot lines with decent amount of screen time. I mean, remember back when Yara made a big deal about saving Theon? That was like the end of season 3 or something. And then she set off with like a whole bunch of dudes and it was going to be this great big rescue mission. You were like, great, she's a really good character. Can't wait to see what she's going to do. And then halfway through the next season, you hadn't even seen her. And then suddenly she's literally just arrived with all her dudes at the other castle, fought a couple of guys, and then left. And the whole scene was about 5 minutes long. And then you never saw her again for another like 4 episodes. And it was like, right, didn't like that. This better not be the same thing again. But it felt a little bit like it because she's there for 2 seconds and then suddenly like Theon just bursts in and like rescues her and then like he's like, well, I'm off, and she's like, bye. I mean, I really like the Greyjoys. They're a really interesting part of the universe. So it's a callback I'd prefer not to have. I mean, if you're going to do something like that, maybe a little more build up. Because I mean, they did the same thing last season when Euron actually attacked people out of nowhere, and you were suddenly like, oh, suddenly millions of bad guys attacked, and you've no idea. And it was a good surprise, but it felt unearned, if you know what I mean. Anyway, another thing is the show's back to making Tyrion seem like an idiot again. Now, that could be a book versus show problem, because I mean, show Tyrion was kind of wise and learned and clever in seasons like 1 to 5, maybe, and he was always clever in the books and always still is. But as soon as the show went kind of off book, they started making him make daft decisions and not being very clever. And he would make plans with really obvious flaws in them, and you think, but Tyrion wouldn't have made such an obvious mistake in previous seasons. And now he's like the hand of the queen, but he's falling for like Cersei's nonsense lies about sending an army, and even Sansa's calling him out. Now, Sansa 3 seasons ago was like a goofy, traumatized child who like didn't even know the word shit. No, honestly, she thought the word was shift. She made a joke about sheep shift, and he actually asked, like Tyrion asked her about, and said, "Well, what's all that about?" And it was because she was naive and didn't really understand. She's not stupid. She's very clever. But she was naive, and now she's had a couple of seasons of bad times and a couple of weird marriages to evil guys, and suddenly she's a literal genius and he's turned into a complete idiot. And it hints at like the kind of bad writing you get in shows where somebody wants to make someone clever but the writer doesn't know how, so what they do is they just make everyone around them who's supposed to be clever suddenly act really stupid. That's a bad writing decision. I mean, obviously the difference with this is something like Jon Snow.
It's not important.
Not important.
Because Jon Snow isn't that bright. He's not that bright. He's a good guy, but he's not actually that clever. And he's certainly not any kind of military or tactical genius. And that was the whole point and part of his character, is his sisters are much cleverer than he is. But similarly, when it comes to daft decisions, the whole bit with Euron and Cersei having sex, that was strange. I mean, I didn't get it. Now, Euron's a pirate and a rogue and a nutcase, but he's also supposed to be like a witty tactician and he's nobody's fool. So is he playing the fool here, or is he playing Cersei? Is he undermining her? Or did he literally just want a royal bonk above everything else and he just doesn't care? I mean, you can't seriously think that she isn't already planning like his horrible death, surely. I mean, he can't be that stupid. But I get the feeling that with the way that last season was written, that they might be going that way. I mean, so it might just be that without George R. R. Martin at the writing desk laying us on a page, that Dan and D.B. Weiss seem to struggle a wee bit. But I didn't really understand why Cersei slept with him at all. I mean, was it there to seal his loyalty? Because I mean, he seems like the kind of guy who might just bugger off now. I mean, a kind of hit it and run sort of pirate. I mean, now he's got money, he's got gems and gold and things, he's got bragging rights, he's killed most of his big enemies. There's nothing to stop him like ditching her if things go badly. It could also be that she's lonely since Jamie left, but it's really hard to say because her character's not really been like that. And without like the internal monologue you get in the books, it's difficult to say. But she's certainly made her bed and she clearly lies in it with pirates now, and it seems, and then she cries afterwards. So it could just go either way. It's hard to say, and this could all be set up for something more interesting later. So I'm quite happy to like wait and see. But all in all, I mean, there's not actually been that much to moan about of substance, because there wasn't that much of substance in the episode. As I said, this is mostly set up, it was mostly nicely done, it was beautifully shot. But yeah, it's a good start to a final season. So what do I think is going to happen next? Well, hard to say. All the pieces are on the board now, and everybody just about got a couple of lines, except maybe, Pod and Brienne and Hot Pie if he ever turns up again. Anyway, it's a good start. And so if you haven't already, why not subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, and comment below and tell me what you think, because it really does actually help my channel. So until next week, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.